In last week's installment of this story, we focused on the moment when an angry boy asked his mother if it was true that eating with his father was more important than spending time with him. Immediately afterwards, the protagonist tried to tell her son that there is nothing more important than him, but the angry boy began to shout loudly that his mother will now spend all her time with his father. Obviously, he is expressing his jealousy in this way. Immediately after that, Kaisel turns around and leaves, saying that even during meals his mother will spend time with his father without him. The protagonist tries to say something to him, but the boy does not listen and continues to leave. Seeing this, the protagonist wonders if the boy has misunderstood, and realizing that she must help the boy to understand, she chases after him and catches him by the waist. The mother immediately pressed her son to her side and told him that he would always be the most important to his mother, while the boy listened to this with a delighted face, but then he becomes as sullen as he was before, in the ground asking his mother what all these words mean. At that moment, the protagonist realizes what she needs to do to soften the boy's heart. Hugging her son, she tells him that compared to other people in the world, she likes to spend time with her son the most. Hearing this, the boy once again became embarrassed and blushed, but the boy tells his mother that he didn't ask her about it, and once again tries to break out of her embrace, at which point the protagonist thinks that he has a very cold voice. She thinks that maybe her words were out of place. She gets very upset about this and remembers that Kaisel still doesn't love her. Because of these thoughts, she gets very upset and lets her son go. But suddenly, instead of leaving, the boy turned to his mother and hugged her tightly. Obviously, the protagonist did not expect this, but she is obviously pleased that the boy has started to treat her so warmly. The surprise that the protagonist experienced at this time is impossible to hide. She was even a little embarrassed, which made her cheeks blush. The girl called out to her son, but the boy looked up with a very cute look, finally called the main character his mom. At this point, it seems as if the boy is ready to cry. After that, he lowered his gaze a little, but at the same time as if trying to talk about something. After he decided to say something to his mother, the guy asked her to get some more sleep, because according to him, when it hurts, you need a good rest. He's still hugging his mom. Right after that, the guy says to eat the chocolate he gave me with a well-wishing wish. He insists on it very strongly. Apparently, it's very important to him. The main character, realizing how much the guy started to change and what care he started to show towards her, also melted and hugged her son very tightly right after that. She told him to do everything as he told her. A few days later, the protagonist is in her room with her maid, and she is dressed up nicely and looks in the mirror. At this moment, the maid's eyes are just shining with happiness. Then the protagonist asked her if she likes the gift that is in her hands. In response to this, the maid says that she is 100% sure of it, because it is the highest level information that she received from the chef. According to the maid, he will love this gift, especially when he finds out that his mistress made it for him. It turned out that the main heroine really made it for her son. While she was cooking, the chef literally begged her to let them do it for her. Then the protagonist looks at the gift she has prepared for her son and says that it would be very nice if her son would like it. The actions of the story are transferred to the garden, to the place where the boy likes to spend his time. The protagonist entered the garden and said hello to her son. The boy did not answer her and just began to look at his mother meaningfully. Immediately afterwards, once again blushing a little, he looks at her and asks if she is still in pain. But the mother tells her son that thanks to his worries, she is fine. She thanks her son for taking time out for her today, trying to pretend that he still does not love his mother. The boy tells his mother that it's all because he promised her to meet her. But the main character at this point is very happy and thinks about the fact that her son even began to keep the promise he made to his mother. This fact makes her very happy. Then turn to her maid. The protagonists wonder if she will help her. Of course, the maid cannot refuse her mistress and says that she will help. Then Cheryl sat down in front of the boy and began to wait for his reaction. At that moment, Daisy began to cut the pie that Cheryl had prepared. The protagonist herself tells her son that she brought it to eat with him. She also asks if he wants to taste this delicious pie. After the boy saw what his mother had prepared for him, his eyes immediately glazed over and his face a little red. He is impressed that his mother has prepared for him a pecan cake that he apparently just loves. Immediately after that, the embarrassed boy took a fork in his hands. He asked his mom if he understood correctly that he should eat this cake maturely with a fork. After he asked the question, the boy noted that he wanted to eat the cake with his hands. But the main character, as if did not even hear this question and just thought about the fact that she was hard cooking it, so she wants him to eat it quickly. Also looks at the boy and tells him that the mistress has been trying very hard since morning. So she affirmatively asks him to taste this cake as soon as possible. Immediately after that, the boy put his fork on the table and took the cake in his hands. After that, Cassell finally decided to try the cake, and while he took a bite of the main, Heroine looked directly at him with admiration. But the happy face of the boy immediately changed. Seeing this, the protagonist asked her son if he liked the cake, but the boy immediately replied that the cake was tasteless. At these words, the protagonist and Daisy were literally petrified. Tears began to form on the protagonist's face as she replayed in her head the words that her cake was tasteless. She began to wonder what was wrong with her cake. The girl thinks that maybe she should have added more sugar, or maybe the batter is not done properly. She doesn't understand what is wrong with her cake, and her emotions came over her and she started crying very hard. Dropping her head down to hide her tears, she apologized to her son and emphasized that she was cooking for the first time in her life. It seems to her that she was too hasty. At this time, the boy is just watching his mother. Surprised at what his mother had told him, he asked her if it was true that she had prepared this for her. At this moment, he was still holding a piece of cake in his hands, but the protagonist was not lost by his question and clarified that she had heard that he liked such cakes. After that, she immediately began to justify herself by saying that she had never cooked before, so it may not be to her son's taste. But the boy immediately took a piece of cake, which he did not finish, and very diligently began to eat it. The main character is very surprised by this and turned to her son to understand what is happening. She got up from her seat and told her son that she was fine, so he could not eat it if he did not like it. But the boy, looking at his mom, says that it is not so, and who would care, because according to him he likes it, so he will finish it. After he had finished eating the first piece of cake, Cassell immediately asked Daisy to give him another piece. Pleased with his behavior, Daisy told the boy that she would fulfill his request. Seeing this, the protagonist finally got a little happier and pointed out that the boy said it wasn't good, and she obviously wanted to ask him why he was eating it. But the boy interrupted her and said that after he finished that piece, it tasted normal to him. Then Cheryl smiled and told her son that she would do her best for him. Then their dialogue ended and the action moved back to the house. Walking through the corridors of her house, the protagonist thought that today Cassell was very nice. She admires the fact that he talked nicely and even ate a few slices of the cake that she had prepared for him. During her thoughts, the girl reaches the door and starts knocking on it. She again thought about the fact that for the sake of such a cute baby, she needs to try to get closer to her husband as soon as possible. When she knocked on her husband's door, the girl turned to him and said that it was her. While in her thoughts, she was already working out a plan of further actions, in her opinion. When she opened the door, she should smile radiantly and control her expression. But instead of the Duke opened the door to her, the door was opened by Ritvel Muo. The guy is the Duke's assistant. The assistant did not even have time to say anything when suddenly heard the voice of the Duke, who asked who came at this time. Also, the Duke wondered if the lady came to him. The aide, seeing that the Duke had indeed been visited by his wife, informed him of this, after which he bowed a little to the lady, while the Duke, who was busy with some documents, asked his wife what had happened since she had come to him. The main character, who follows her plan, smiles broadly and says that she has nothing important. But there is something that she does not realize when she looks through some of her files. Then the girl asks her husband if he could give her some time. Hears his wife's request, tells his wife that he is busy. By the Duke's face, you can tell that he has an unbending will and is not interested in talking to his wife at all. The girl who stands in front of him literally does not understand what to answer him. She and the assistant Duke are shocked by such a cold answer from her husband. The Duke, seeing that his wife is not going to leave, asks her if she hasn't heard what he told her. The man once again repeats that he is busy, so he insistently asks her to leave his office. Seeing that the Duke is not in the mood to talk to his wife, his aide, smiling broadly, says that he will step aside for a while. Thus, he thinks he will give them the space they need to talk. Realizing this, the Duke got a little angry and told his aide that he didn't need to go anywhere, and just needed to send his wife back to where she came to him. The surprised assistant, along with his angry wife, turn to the Duke, at which point the lady wonders if the Duke really doesn't have some free time to talk to his wife. The aide in turn thought about the fact that just now he was worried about his wife. But after the lady came to him, he treats her very coldly. The guy emphasizes that he even said that he would go out to leave them alone. But the Duke still insists that he stay, and because of this he does not understand what is wrong. "I'm trying to have a relationship with my husband." The main character says that he will get a headache if he keeps looking at the documents. Then she asks him to distract himself a little, and if he wants to, they can go for a walk in the garden. These words do not impress the Duke at all, and turning to his assistant, he asks if he has heard that the Duke told him that he is busy now. Of course, the assistant is surprised by this, but the Duke once again insists that the assistant sends his wife back. The assistant, embarrassed by the incident, apologizes for her rudeness and tells the protagonist that Herza is very busy and cannot talk to her. Of course, the aide tries to soften his expressions at least somehow and ends by saying that he's glad the lady herself came, but the Duke gets over him without letting the guy write himself. Having escorted the protagonist out the door, he tells her that it is late today, but asks her to come when the sun rises. Smiling, the protagonist agrees with the assistant and wishes them a good job. At that moment, Daisy meets her mistress in the hallway. She notices that the protagonist is very depressed and decides to ask if she is okay now. But the protagonist tries not to show that she is depressed and smilingly turns to her maid while she thinks that she feels quite abnormal, because what she should be fine now. She looks around and realizes that what she's doing now is not easy, and she needs to make an excuse to come to the Duke's house this afternoon. The action of the story is transferred to the next day. The main character looks at the list of things to do today and realizes that there is nothing particularly important. Then she put the list aside and delightedly began to think about what would be a book to read to her son today. Unexpectedly, Daisy enters the room. The protagonist is a little surprised that the maid broke into her, but the girl immediately handed her mistress a letter and said that it came from the Marquis Fenzel. The protagonist is naturally very surprised by this fact, but she still decided to open the letter. It turns out that the letter was a thank you for the fact that the protagonist responded to the invitation on the occasion of the child's birthday. Also, the Marquis will be interested if there is anything that he needs to take care of separately. According to him, if the protagonist or her child likes some flowers or desserts, they will have to inform them about it, that the Marquis would carefully prepare for their arrival. While reading it, the protagonist thinks about the fact that she refused all the invitations. So this letter seems strange, while the protagonist remembers that Daisy suddenly spoke to her when she was answering the invitation, and the girl misunderstood everything. This fact very surprised the main character, and she realized that it was an invitation to a birthday party. Daisy did not fully understand about what birthday we are talking about, and asked if it is not too far away from the birthday of the young gentleman. Daisy began to look at the mistress with admiration and asked, "Did the girl really decide to start preparing for her son's birthday already now?" Daisy is very happy about it, and thinks that the mistress has really changed. Also, she realizes that the young master will be very happy. Without even hearing what the letter was about, Daisy says that mistress can fully rely on her comma, and they will prepare an unexpected and very luxurious party for Cassel. But the protagonist interrupts her delighted maid and says that it is not what she thought. Cheryl is very worried about this birthday because she doesn't know how to be. After all, apparently she will have to go to another child's birthday party earlier than Cassel's birthday party. The protagonist realizes that the appointed date of the meeting is already in 2 weeks. She thinks about the fact that she has already heard somewhere the name of Marquis on the birthday of whose child she should go. Then the girl starts running his last name through her head and wonders where she might have heard of him. Suddenly it hits her. She remembered that this Marquis is a very young, handsome man whose name is Radios Fenzel. His face even surfaced in her memories. Remembering this, the protagonist fell in a state of incomprehension. She thought about the fact that if this is really the Marquis she thought of, it was him that Cassel killed when he became more mature. Remembering this, the protagonist's face immediately changed and became a little more sad. She thought about whether Cassel really in the future will kill this guy. In the form of the desperate state of her mistress, Daisy decided to turn to her in order to understand what the problem is. But the protagonist thinks that she has just solved one problem, has suddenly appeared a completely different one. In her opinion, there is no end to it. Suddenly, after these thoughts, she comes to the realization that her son, whom she started to bring up in a completely different way, will never do that to this Marquis. She realizes that she will definitely bring up the boy correctly. Having made up her mind, the protagonist stays in her seat and tells her maid that she wants to meet her son now, and because of this desire, she asks Daisy if she can take her to him. At this time, the Duke is still working hard in his office, and his aide comes up to him to remind him that the time will soon come when the lady will return to them. And the aide notes that they are having a hard time living with her, talking to them every day. When the Duke heard that the assistant reminded the Duke that the lady was coming soon, the Duke got angry and asked him if his assistant really didn't have enough work, because in his opinion today he talks too much. Realizing that the Duke would burden him with work, the guy says that he has enough work that he has. But not everything is so simple. The Duke still thinks about his wife. He realizes that she became very strange after the incident with the carriage. He seems suspicious of the fact that she tries to visit him every day lately. Because of these thoughts, memories of a past time came over the Duke. He remembers his wife starting to scream at him as soon as he touched her. Then the protagonist behaved horribly and didn't even look in his direction. Also at that point in time, Sheriel was humiliating the Duke a lot. She asked him if there was a reason why she should treat the Duke well. The guy realized that he was probably not going to have a good life with his wife, but he asked her to treat him well at least once. And after saying that, he asked her to smile at their wedding the next day. But the girl did not even listen to the guy and turned away from him and told him that she had nothing to talk to him about. After which she asked her future husband to leave the room. Remembering all that had happened before, the Duke thought about the fact that his wife had always been very cold to him. It turns out he thought that he would never see her bright smile again. But immediately after these dark memories, he begins to remember how warmly his wife began to treat him. It turns out one day she came to him. She brought him tea as a gift, as she then said, "This tea is a great fatigue reliever." Another day when Sheriel visited her husband, she asked him if he would like to have a cup of tea with her. Then she mentioned that she had heard that the Duke was patrolling the grounds today. Also then Poe's wife asked him if the Duke would mind if she went on patrol with him, after which she praised the cake their cook had baked. After that, he remembers another time when his wife came to visit. This time she asked him if he wanted to take a break and have a little chat with her. Remembering these vivid moments that have happened recently after the incident with the carriage, the Duke wondered if his wife would come today with the same smile as she had recently, while he realizes that it is a meaningless hope. But he still cannot stop thinking about it. Seeing the Duke's somewhat depressed state, his assistant turns to him and asks, "Is it true that the Duke has been very tired the last few days of work, but not?" The indignant Duke tears one sheet out of his notebook and says that there was nothing special in his mode of work for him to be too tired. Seeing that the Duke cannot be reached in this way, the assistant decides to open a conversation about his wife. According to him, Madame is late today, and that's why he decides to ask if he should go and see if she's all right. Suddenly, the Duke closes his notebooks and stands up from his seat. He agrees that perhaps he has overworked a bit in the last few days, and states that he feels he is already tired. He heads for the exit and tells his assistant that it is quite difficult for him to constantly sit in the office, so he decided to walk around his house a little, leading. This assistant is very surprised because the Duke was usually always busy with work. Being in incomprehension, the aide points the Duke to a stack of documents that lie on his desk. Then he asks where he suddenly went, because the Duke still has a lot of work to do. But the Duke looked at his assistant and asked him if it was his duty to help with the documents. The guy realized that Herza was talking about his duties, and realized that he would have to deal with all the work himself. The aide also told the Duke that if he was going to see his wife, he should head to the garden, because rumor has it that she's been spending a lot of time there lately. Hearing the speech about his wife, the Duke immediately became embarrassed and blushed. He said that it was pointless for him to say such things, because if he meets his wife, it will happen only by chance. And he also emphasizes that he tells his assistant in advance so that he does not have any thoughts. Hearing this, the assistant's head still crept into his head that the Duke was just trying to look cold. Because of these thoughts, he also blushed a little and wished his master a good time. Suddenly walking through the corridors, the Duke hears someone calling someone a liar. The Duke is a little surprised at what he hears, and then wonders if he is correct in realizing that it is his son's voice. In parallel, the main character asks her son why he started calling his mom a liar, but the boy loudly says that she first goes to his father every day, and then to him. This confuses him a little, because earlier the main character said that he is the most precious to her. Right after that, the boy closes the book he's been reading, and looking directly at his mom, asks her if she really likes spending time with his dad that much. Hearing this, the Duke, who is still in the corridor and eavesdropping, is incredibly surprised that his son has become jealous of his wife to him. Also, the protagonist tries to justify herself to his son in order not to spoil the relationship with him. At the same time, the Duke, who is right at the door, blushes and thinks about the fact that he has come to a point in his life where he has to eavesdrop on other people's conversations. He himself is unable to understand what he is doing now. The Duke thinks about the fact that all this time when his wife came to him, his heart was filled with love. It is obvious that he is imbued with feelings for his wife. In parallel, the protagonist tries to convince her son that she still loves him the most. She says she loves being with him more than with his father. Hearing this, the Duke's face immediately changed to a look of confusion, and he obviously wasn't very happy about what he was hearing. But Kaisel is not so easy to change his mind about what he thought. The boy Mila tells his mom that once again she is lying to him. But the main character takes her son by the hand and once again tells him that it is not a lie. She said she had come to ask him if he wanted to go with her to the Marquise's birthday party. And the boy was a little surprised at the question and did not know what to say at first. But after a short thought, the boy asked who the Marquis was. Hearing this, the protagonist realized that the boy might not mind going to the birthday party. She clarifies that the Marquis is a young gentleman of his age who invited them to his birthday party. Then she once again asks her son if she will go to the birthday party with him. The boy, like last time, just keeps silent and thinks about this proposal. Also, after a short thought, he says that if they go, maybe they should prepare a present. Saying this, he even blushed a little. Look, it's the main character is a little excited and asks her son if it wouldn't be better if they prepared a gift in advance. But then Sheriel's face changes. Suddenly, during the conversation, the boy started crying, and taking his mother's hands, he started shouting loudly that she did not give him any birthday presents unlike this Marquis. Seeing the indignation from her son, the protagonist will think about the fact that perhaps she made a mistake. She did not need to talk about birthday presents, because she realizes that Sheriel never celebrated her son's birthday. The boy does not allow his mother to touch him, and still crying says that he has realized all along that what his mother is doing seems rather strange. He thinks that she is once again trying to hurt him in this way. At that moment, the protagonist remembers how earlier, when she had not yet entered this body, a crying boy ran up to his mother, but the protagonist told him not to dare to call her mom. At that point in time, Sheriel turned to her son and told him that he made her teeth grind, thus showing her disdain for her son. Already in the present tense, the protagonist holds her head, because she is in a lot of pain. The girl wonders if these memories really belong to Sheriel. She also realizes that it was too bad behavior towards the child. Having realized this, the girl tries to justify her behavior and tries to tell the boy that his mother will not behave like that anymore. But he once again starts screaming and crying while saying that he does not need a mother like her. The boy clenched his fists and, still sobbing, says that he no longer expects anything from his mother. It becomes clear that the disappointment he feels will be very difficult to overcome. At this point, the protagonist remembers what happened that day. It turns out that the boy still called the girl Mom, But the protagonist once again turned to him and asked him not to call her mom anymore, while she called these actions disgusting on the part of the boy. But the crying boy, even after these words, did not stop, and told his mother that it was his birthday. But the cold protagonist at that moment in time did not betray this meaning. The boy, who was still holding on to his mother's dress and still crying hard, told her that he wanted her to congratulate him very much on such an important day. He insisted that she do it at least once, because it was very important to him. But Sheriel still continued to be very rude and mean to the boy, and just called his name so he wouldn't talk to her anymore. She then asked that the boy do her a favor and not act like he was a child anymore. Obviously, these words affected the boy even more, and he started crying even harder, calling Sheriel mom. Parallel to this in the real world, the boy was still crying, and the protagonist clutched her head. She realized that for a short while in her mind, the memories of the past owner of this body had resurfaced. In her opinion, these memories were just breaking her heart. She realizes that if she had been able to calm the cough, things might have been different. The girl blames herself for not wishing her son a happy birthday, even though she didn't even own the body at the time. Suddenly, after these thoughts, the protagonist immediately began to hug her son to comfort him. She asked his forgiveness for her past behavior. It turns out that the main character also began to cry because she realizes that she cannot forgive herself for what she used to do with a small child. But simple apologies cannot surprise the boy. He immediately pushes the protagonist away and says that he hates his mother, while he still continues to cry. Even the fact that the boy pushed the protagonist away does not stop her. She still hugs her son tightly and apologizes for leaving him alone in the past. She also apologizes for hugging him and for not loving him. The girl realizes that she made her son feel completely alone, and she wipes the tears from her son's face and tells him that she will give him love that cannot be replaced by anything. But the soothed boy says that even so, he still hates his mom. But the protagonist, even after these painful words, says that she still loves her son, after which they both blush a little, for there is a pause between them. After the passions between them had subsided a little, the protagonist sat in a chair and put her son on her lap. She asked him, should she make a grand banquet in honor of his birthday? But the boy, who is still trying to appear cold, says that he hates a lot of people. These words do not calm the protagonist at all, and she says that she would very much like Castle to receive as many congratulations as possible. After that, she starts to emphasize that the boy loves sweets very much. She tries to interest her son in a huge cake, saying that if there will be a lot of people at the celebration, the cake will be very huge and luxurious. Then she asks her son if he is not interested in it. The boy is still trying to show his disdain for his mother, and for all her ideas, he says he doesn't know if they should have a big banquet, and leaves it up to his mother to decide. But the main character still continues to convince her son that it's necessary and says it's his special day. And she also asks him if he wants anything else besides a big cake. She then asks him if she correctly understands that the boy has all sorts of beautiful and necessary things, at which point the boy thinks about it all. And after a short thought, he says he wants to receive congratulations on such an occasion. Hearing this, the protagonist asks him to say it a little louder. And then the blushing boy looks down and says he wants a birthday greeting. Obviously, he's finally starting to talk more openly to his mom. As the protagonist recalls those very memories, she thinks about the fact that as soon as she remembers the sight of her son at that moment, her tears don't stop. The protagonist blushed a little and said that if the boy wants it, they will do so. According to her, she make it go the best way. Hearing this, the boy requests that in this case the mother will not be late to celebrate his birthday. Also, right after that, he says that he really wants her to congratulate him before everyone else. The boy got a little embarrassed and even touched his mother's hands. The protagonist agrees and asks if her son will spare some time for her tomorrow. She wants them to have a party in his favorite garden. Upon hearing this, the boy immediately began to hug his mother and said that of course he would make time for her to spend it together, at which time the Duke had already opened the door a little to observe what was going on in the room. After the Duke heard all of his wife's plans with his son, he headed back to his room and thought about how tonight was going to be a very long night. The actions of the story are moved to the next day. In the garden, the protagonist is already congratulating her son, while the Duke comes to observe it with surprise. It turned out last night was very hard for him. He loaded a huge amount of work for his assistant, who did not understand why he had to do it all for today. The guy at first thought that he was guilty of something, but then decided to ask if it could be because something was wrong with the lady. At this time, the tired Duke did not answer him anything. At this point, he comes to the place where the protagonist has arranged a party for her son. The Duke himself, at this point thinking that perhaps he has worked all night for nothing. But then he sees in the distance how all the maids, together with his wife, have surrounded the castle and are making merry with him, wearing on their heads the hats that are usually worn on holidays. The main character herself looks very happy and tells her son that this hat suits him very much, while the boy looks at the beautiful cake that was prepared especially for him. At this moment, the shy protagonist wishes her son a happy birthday, and immediately after her, all the servant girls around them do the same. After everyone has congratulated Kasal on his birthday, the boy decides to blow out the candles from the cake. At this point, the shy boy once again blushed at the attention to himself. Suddenly, the protagonist begins to turn her head around because recently she began to feel a very strange look at herself. At this moment, she notices that she is staring at her intently looks at the Duke himself. Because she noticed who was looking at her, the girl decided to step back a bit and talk to the Duke, wondering if it would be okay if she stepped back for a while, to see what would happen if she stepped back. The protagonist looks at the boy who is being entertained by the maids. Heading to the Duke, the protagonist asks him what he's doing here. But the Duke, instead of giving her a clear answer, asks her back and asks what she's doing. And what's that ridiculous hat on her head? The protagonist immediately changes her face and doesn't look so pleased. She says that her cap isn't ridiculous because she made it with great difficulty. She also tells the Duke that they are holding a party in honor of their son's birthday. The girl points to the servants who are entertaining Cassel, and she also clarifies that the son said that he doesn't like too many people, so they decided to wish him a happy birthday at the mansion. The Duke, who still regarded the actions of the mistress with apprehension, hesitated a little, then asked why she was doing what she had never done before. The main character herself is also a little surprised that the Duke has come here. She does not understand why he suddenly decided to do this, because she knows that usually he was always busy. But today he asks especially many questions. That said, she decides to answer him anyway, and with a smile on her face, says she's doing all this because their mutual son is a very sweet boy. Hearing about it, the Duke asks the lady if she left her son in the care of a nanny, because she did not want him to touch her. The protagonist says that it was really a strange act on her part, because their son is very cute and charming. She herself wonders how she could do that to him. Also at this point, the protagonist thinks about the fact that even though she's having flashbacks to memories that are related to Sheriel, she still doesn't feel the same emotions. Even after these theses, the Duke is still apprehensive about his wife's actions, and says that she says it as if it were her business, while he notes that her behavior is not like a simple game. When the protagonist blushed and said that now it is no longer someone else's job, and that is why she does it herself. According to her, the education of their common son is their concern. Then she asks the Duke if he wants to do it together. Upon hearing the protagonist say their son's name, the Duke lowered his head slightly and emphasized that, since recently, she calls her son by his nickname and still calls him Duke. Suddenly, he looks directly at his spouse and asks her if she really doesn't know his name. Apparently, he says this ironically so that she will start calling him by his name. Taking this question literally, the protagonist is very worried about it, because she asked Daisy, but since she didn't have a chance to call him, she forgot. At which point, using all her mental effort, the protagonist tries to remember her husband's name, but she can't. The Duke becomes even more agitated and starts to emphasize it even more. He insistently asks the protagonist to say his name. Seeing that the protagonist still remains silent and does not call his name, the Duke crossed his arms and asked her why she remained silent instead of answering him. But the protagonist was finally able to remember her husband's name and said that his name was Kian, and the girl said his name with great warmth. This warmth was felt by the Duke himself, who was very much surprised that she remembered his name. He thought of the fact that his wife had just called him by his nickname, and by this action she seemed to melt his heart. The incredibly excited protagonist says that she wants her husband to let her call him by that name, and then she decides to ask him if he likes the idea. The Duke himself at this moment turned his head a little to hide his emotions, but from his face, which is very much flushed, you can understand that he is slowly melting towards his wife, while he still does not answer her anything. The protagonist herself is worried, because she still can't remember his full name, so she had to get out of the situation, wondering if it was a big mistake on her part. The Duke himself at this point is thinking about the fact that she used to call him Duke all the time, and he doesn't understand why she suddenly started calling him by such an affectionate name. The Duke also thinks about the fact that apparently his wife is really opening up to him. He realizes that if she continues to behave like this, he is likely to fall in love with her in a new way. But he still does not answer her, and noticing this, the protagonist asks him if he likes the name. Embarrassed that his wife is opening up to him, the Duke tells her that she can do as she sees fit, while once again saying that he has unfinished business. So he leaves. Seeing the Duke quickly trying to leave the garden, the protagonist thinks that apparently everything went well, but at that moment she is approached from behind by a castle. Running up to his mom, the boy pulled her dress to get her attention. Immediately, with a cute face, he asked her what she was talking to his dad about. The protagonist tries to get out of this conversation and says that they did not talk to the father, nothing special, but she suddenly, as if it hit her, and she realized that maybe he wants to get congratulations, and the father, the girl, blames herself for the fact that she did not think about it initially. After realizing this, the protagonist immediately went down to the boy's level and apologized to him for this. She said she didn't invite her father to the party, and then decided to ask the boy if he was angry with her because of this. Then she says that if we are honest, his father came to wish him a happy birthday, but because of an urgent matter he couldn't even greet him. At this point, the boy just watches his mom with a cold stare. Right after that, the boy starts to take his mom's hand away from his face and asks her to stop talking about his dad. But the girl tries to change the vector of their conversation and tries to say something about the party. But the boy interrupts her and quietly says something about cake. Realizing that Sun wants them to try that big, delicious cake, the protagonist pretends that she didn't hear what he said and asks the boy to speak louder again what he said earlier. Hearing about it, the boy, with a little shyness, immediately grabbed his mother's hand and told her to go together to eat cake. Hearing about it, the main character, of course, very happy, while she wonders how she can be with it, because her son is very cute. Then the maid cut off a small piece of cake for the boy and urged him to try it, for according to her, it came out much better this time than last time. The butler, who was also at the birthday party, says that everything is right, and the lady carefully chose all the ingredients for the cake. And the main thing the heroine tries to say is that of course she didn't make the cake herself, but she carefully chose the ingredients for it and paid a lot of attention to it. When the servants who were here start crying because they tried to say that the cake was made by the lady. Immediately afterward, the boy put the strawberries from the cake on his fork and asked his mother if she would wish him a happy birthday next time, while looking very cute and as if he was embarrassed to ask the question. Hearing this question, the protagonist and all the servants who were there were very much surprised, as if they were trying to tell him that for him prepared infinite love from all who are here. But the protagonist was not confused, and immediately sat down to her son and told him that now she will always congratulate him on his birthday, because this holiday belongs to her precious son. Also, according to her, today's party that she threw was to celebrate this beautiful day. According to her, this will continue in the future. At the moment when the main character says these words, her eyes shine with happiness. The boy looks at his mother with great joy. He once again blushed a little from her words and asked her if she promises him that everything will continue exactly as she said. Suddenly, tears appear in the main character's eyes. She can't understand why they suddenly appeared, and her memory flashes back to the moment when her son told someone that he wished she had looked at him at least once. He said at that moment, even if he didn't get a single compliment for doing a good job, he still wanted to feel a little warmth. At that moment, the protagonist was already drowning in her tears, while realizing that her heart was hurting and wondering who Cassell had said that to. The boy was also very surprised when he saw his mother suddenly crying. He immediately decided to ask her why she suddenly cried and whether she was okay, while at the same time the servants give the main character a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. Seeing that the boy is worried about the condition she's experiencing, the protagonist says she's fine, and states that she thinks it's because she's been shocked at how much her son has grown. She literally starts to go crazy because she has already lied to her son many times today. She even mentally apologizes to him for this, but suddenly the boy interrupts her from her thoughts and says that he has heard that eating sweets makes you feel better. At that moment, the main character looks after him with surprise. After the boy said this, he gives his mom the fork he put the strawberries on and tells her that the cake is delicious and she should try it. Right after that, she eats this piece of cake, and the boy asks her if she likes it. The main character says that he shouldn't have even asked about it because the cake became even tastier because her own son fed her, but she still notices that this time, the cake became really much tastier than it was before. Hearing this, the boy says that in that case he will give his mother another piece. At this time, the servants who were watching this literally start crying with joy. They cannot believe that he managed to see such a beautiful moment. They are very happy to be alive. They are so impressed by what they saw that they were even ready to give their monthly salary to see this picture. Immediately afterwards, Cheryl thanks her son for offering her another piece of cake. And as she eats it, the girl realizes that she is experiencing some very strange feelings. She thinks that maybe this feeling is triggered by some other memory from the past, which makes her feel like she shouldn't be happy. Immediately after that, the story moves forward a few days. Already in her office, the protagonist signs some documents while Daisy pours her tea. After she finished her work, the protagonist pulled up a little while. Daisy told her that she did a very good job. Right after that, full of enthusiasm, Daisy asked Mistress Gunna if she was going to go to the young master. But the protagonist says that she will not do it now. After a while, the main character comes to her son, who is reading another book. The boy no longer looks as inspired as he was before, and asks his mom why she came. Because according to him, he will not talk to a man who does not keep his promises. The main character once again tries to justify her behavior, and says that she is sorry for what happened, but according to her, she had a sudden emergency and had no choice but to leave. The boy closes his book with a meaningful look at his mother and says that they should forget the incident. But he emphasizes that he will not accept excuses next time and asks his mother not to forget that he is the first in importance. He asks her to come to him first and then to do her chores. Then the protagonist touches her son and says that he said everything right and he is always the most important person to her and in the first place in importance. Then the protagonist went to the Duke's office. She looked at him and the assistant, who were already quite exhausted, and said that apparently they have a lot of work today once again. She tells him that she has brought a tea that helps to recover. The girl asks the Duke if she can put this tea on his table, but the guy finally tells her to sit in the chair that is nearby. At this moment, from that chair literally jumps out his assistant. After the protagonist sat down in the same chair, she thought about the fact that usually the Duke told her to come back. She wonders if something wrong is going on because now he did not say that. But the Duke just told the protagonist that as she can independently notice the work he has accumulated a lot. He tells his wife that although he can't give her much time, she can still come to him whenever she wants. And he finally says that he won't kick her out of his office anymore. At this point, the protagonist starts to remember how the Duke asked his assistant to escort the protagonist out of his office. She gets very excited that he finally starts talking to her, and then she thanks him for it. Then the Duke says that she does not call him Kian, but he asks him if she will now come to him first and then go to their son. Because of this, the main character literally gets a very bad headache. She thinks it's like they're in cahoots with her son, because she only has one body and can't go to two people at the same time. Hearing about the problem of his mistress, Daisy says that if things are similar, she has a great idea. Hearing about it, the eyes of the main character as if lit up. After a while, the action moves to the Duke's office, where the guy once again solves some problems with documents. While his wife and his son are drinking tea and reading a book, There is even some awkward pause between them. At this point, the protagonist sips tea from a mug and thinks about the fact that this plan originally seemed perfect to her. But the way things turned out is no longer as perfect as she had imagined before. She does not even realize how things could have turned out this way. It turns out that at the moment when she told Daisy about her problem, Daisy asked her if she understood correctly that the girl wants to fix her relationship with both the Duke and the young gentleman. Then the protagonist said that it is exactly like that. When Daisy heard her mistress's reply, she asked her how then about getting together, and her son and the Duke would certainly like that, in Daisy's opinion. Hearing about it, the main character immediately tells Daisy that the most important thing is that the meeting should not take place in the dining room, because she has very bad memories from the past, which affect her emotionally. Hearing from the dining room, Daisy remembered that soon it will be time for a snack. But if the protagonist does not want to spend this meeting in the dining room, Daisy offers her another option, according to her words. Since recently the protagonist often goes to the Duke's office, she can go there with her son. When the main character hears about it, she gets excited about the idea. She says she's always felt uncomfortable going alone. She hopes it will be more fun than usual if she goes there with her son. At this point, she and Daisy are very happy to have found a way out of the situation. The action is transferred back to the present time. The main heroine is still with a mug in her hand, thinking that it can't go on like this, and she should at least say something to lighten the atmosphere. First, she tries to get the attention of her dear people. The girl does it in the simplest way and just tries to say something. That's how she was able to get the attention of her son and husband to herself. But as soon as the Duke paid attention to her, she told him that she wanted to socialize only with her son, addressing him as Duke. This annoyed the man very much, and he told the girl to continue to call him by his nickname. At this point, the protagonist thought about the fact that the Duke seemed to really like the nickname she used. Right after these thoughts, she called him what she liked. But even with all this, she gently touches her son's shoulders and says that she named only him, at which point the boy pulled away from the book and looked toward his mom. This picture is watched by the Duke. Then he looks with tension at the conversation between these two, which obviously affects the main character in some way. The boy himself at this moment does not feel any tension, and asks his mother, is he right that she has something to say to him? She tries to say something to her son, although she thinks about the fact that she feels the indignant look from the Duke. But the girl is perfectly aware that now she needs to concentrate on communicating with her son. Then the protagonist asks her son if he remembers that in a few days they are going to go to the birthday party of the Marquis. Hearing this, the boy says that of course he remembers, and asks his mother if they will go only together. Obviously, he is trying to make his father a little angry. Hearing this, the Duke was very indignant, but did not say anything. It seems that even the status of his work has changed, and the work is completely out of control. Because of the tension, he clenched the pen in his hand so hard that it cracked and stained all the documents. But the protagonist tries not to pay any attention to it, and asks her son if he can give her some promise before they go to the birthday party. At this time, the Duke is still very much agitated, and over him, even as if clouds and lightning have gathered that completely show his irritation. At the moment when the boy heard about some promise, he immediately put aside the book and looked at his mother and asked her what promise he should give her. At this moment, the main character thinks about the fact that the current Cassell, unlike his original version from the book, will not harm the Marquis of Radius. But at the same time, she realizes that she still needs to be careful. In doing so, the protagonist tells her son that, as she emphasized earlier, the birthday boy is about the same age as him, so she very much wants him to be friends with the Marquis. The boy at that moment realizes what his mother is talking about and asks her, do they really need to get along well with this Marquis? Hearing this, the protagonist asks the boy, does he forget his mother's words? But the boy tries to reassure his mother and says that of course he has not forgotten anything and remembers everything. It turns out that the protagonist told her son that when he meets this Marquis, he should not ignore him or follow him just because he might not like him. Hearing this, the protagonist strokes her son on the head and says that the boy is very clever, while the boy also likes to be praised and says that it is natural. Then the protagonist says that she really wants her son to make friends and have fun together with the Marquis of Radius. Right after that, she holds out her pinky to him and asks if they can seal their promises. Thus, the boy is of course a little surprised and is in contemplation. After a short time of thinking, the boy immediately decided to seal his promise to his mother by taking each other by the little finger while looking directly at his mother. He said that she did not have to ask him to do so. Hearing this, the protagonist again praises her son and calls him pretty, and she tries to say something else to him, but suddenly notices that on the table at the Duke began to fly all the documents that were there. Seeing this, the protagonist realized that the Duke something is not quite in order. Then she asked her son to wait a minute to check what is happening at the Duke, surprisingly, but this time the boy is not even jealous, and agreed to wait a little for his mother. Heading to the Duke's desk, the protagonist thinks about what she heard about him having a lot of work to do. She thinks that maybe he has a pain somewhere, and because of that this little incident with the documents happened. Approaching her husband, she sees that the Duke is very tense. So the main heroine shows her cordiality and asks him if he is all right. She also wonders if she should call a doctor to examine the Duke. Well, suddenly the Duke gently touched the protagonist's hand and informed her that there was no need for it. While looking directly at her, he asked his wife if their son was really as good as she praised him. The main character is of course surprised because she did not expect to hear such a question. She says that in the extreme case, even if it was not so, it is their son, but he is still a very good boy. The words that it is their son have a very strong effect on the Duke and make him think. He thinks that it is natural that his wife will say that he is good, after all it is their son. Video reaction of her husband, the protagonist thinks about the fact that even the Duke emphasizes just on them. In her opinion, even the son who is happy, even a small appearance of affection is also very cute. After these thoughts, the protagonist once again reflects on her life. She wonders whether her going into the body of the Duke's wife has changed the course of the plot so much. Because of these thoughts and the joy that the protagonist obviously started to feel because of all this, she started to laugh a little. Thus she attracted the attention of her husband and her son, who both asked her why she was laughing, but the girl did not give a clear answer and said that she was laughing just for fun. At the same time, she thinks that if she said that the way she could be touched on her hand looks very nice, it would probably cause a storm of indignation, and just decides to tell the Duke that she is enjoying this moment. Immediately after these words, the joyful protagonist, still holding her husband's hand, asks him, how about he takes a short break, and they enjoy the delicious tea that is here together. The Duke naturally agreed to it and went to tea with them. At the moment when he was drinking tea, he and his son looked very unhappy. It seems that between them is not a good relationship. But most importantly, the heroine looked very happy because everything is going as she intended. After a while, they were to go to the birthday celebration of the young Marquis. The moment they left the house, all the servants gathered at the entrance and told the lady and the boy to be careful at the celebration. After they reached the carriage, the girl says goodbye to all her servants, while the boy pulls her dress and tells his mother that his ribbon is untied. In the form of this, the protagonist called her son cute and asked if he really doesn't know how to tie. Hearing this question, the boy answered in the affirmative. Then, when the main character heard that the boy really doesn't know how to tie a handkerchief, she told him that it was no big deal and she would tie it for him herself. After the protagonist finished tying her son's shawl, she told him that everything was ready and she looked very happy. But suddenly the Duke came up to her and asked if they were really leaving. Seeing her husband behind her back, the protagonist is certainly very frightened, because he crept up on her quite unexpectedly. Also looking at him, she thought that he did not seem to be going out, although she admits that perhaps she may not know something. Then the protagonist asked if she understood correctly that the Duke went out to see them off, but the Duke said that he went out just to get some fresh air, and suddenly met his wife and son. At this moment in his head, he imagines his aide, who seems to be asking him how the same he is going to be honest. The protagonist was very much surprised at this, and said that if the truth came out just to get some air, let him save himself. At this time the boy is already climbing into the carriage and tells his mother that they must hurry. But suddenly the Duke's assistant asks the lady could she wait a minute. At this point, the assistant thinks that things are starting to work out pretty well, because the Duke and the Duchess are getting along. He decides to ask the lady how about taking a carriage ride together since they haven't met. The protagonist did not even have time to respond, as the young gentleman immediately rejected the proposal and said that he did not want them to ride together on the carriage. According to him, he is not ready for this to happen for any reason. Upon hearing this, the Duke says it's okay, and he agrees not to go with them. At the same time, he looks directly at his son, and there is some tension between them. The Duchess tries to justify her son's behavior and asks if the Duke will be too uncomfortable in this carriage because it is too small for him. Hearing this, the boy says that this is the case and pulling his mother's arm tells her that they should leave his father and go to the birthday party. Seeing the behavior of his son Duke, decides not to give in to him, and quite confidently tells his wife that everything will be fine, so they will go to the celebration of this birthday all together. These words are very much surprised Duchess Vitya. She could not expect such a turn. Because of this ambiguous decision of the Duke, there is some tension between him and his son. The protagonist observes it from the side and thinks that they are both very strange today, but she cannot understand why. Suddenly, the protagonist realizes why everything happens in this way. She thinks that the Duke wants to get closer to his son, so he wants to go with them. But the boy is very shy, and that's why he behaves so coldly towards his father. The protagonist realizes that her husband is trying for the sake of their son, and so she must also help him to bring them closer together. She says that if the Duke says so, then let it be as he wants it to be. Then she tells them that she will prepare a separate carriage so that the Duke and her son can ride together, apart from her. Apparently in this way, she is trying to bring them closer together and leave them alone to talk to each other. Immediately after she said this, the boy immediately got into the carriage and loudly slammed the door. Then he said that he would ride in this carriage alone. Of course, the protagonist is a little surprised by this behavior of her son, also unexpectedly changed, and the behavior of the Duke, who said that he remembered that he had some urgent business, and then immediately turned around and began to go back to his palace. Apparently to her, this act left the protagonist in a stupor. At that moment, the main character got very excited. She didn't understand what was going on and thought that maybe she made some mistake. It turns out that later on she still went in the same carriage with the castle because she couldn't afford to send her young son alone, so she decided to go together with him. The joyful Duchess asks her son if he is excited about this birthday, as it is the first time they are going to an event together, but the boy looks coldly at his mom and tells her that he is not very excited. His cold answer has a great effect on the protagonist. She thinks she is faithful to him. Still not good because of the incident that happened recently with his father. But suddenly the protagonist seems to come up with some perfect idea. Then she tells her son that she has heard that the Marquis of Radius serves delicious desserts at every party. She knows that such a way can interest her son because he is an avid sweet tooth. As she expected, the speech about delicious desserts interested the boy very much. The girl realized that he would want to talk to her about desserts, and in this way she could cheer him up. Also, seeing that she was able to interest her son, the girl emphasizes that since Cassell likes pecan pie, she asked Marquis to pay special attention to it, this gesture obviously influencing the boy. After Cassell heard about the pecan pie, he once again blushed a bit and his eyes lit up. Obviously, this is because the boy just loves this pie. But at the same time, this conversation is causing him to have obviously mixed feelings. He continues to try to appear cold to his mother, and asks her if she really thinks he's a little kid who likes everything he eats. The protagonist realizes that the boy is just trying to appear cold. But she's actually interested in him, and thinks he's just cute. Seeing that she has found the right topic of conversation, the main character says that she does not consider him a little boy, but she just wanted him to eat a delicious pecan pie, because according to her, the pie she made for him last time was not very tasty. Hearing about it, the boy finally began to show his true emotions, and says that it's all wrong. And in his opinion, the pie that the main character made for him was very tasty. When the protagonist hears about it, she pretends to agree with him, but she also thinks that even though the cake she made was tasteless, he ate it all with gusto, in her opinion making her son an even better child than she thought he was. Mom's reaction makes Cole a little nervous, despite directly at her. He asks why she is laughing. The protagonist apologizes to him, and once again says that she is laughing simply because he is a cutie. The boy once again tries to seem cold, and tells his mom that she doesn't have to tell him that, because he will still behave well at the event. The girl just thanks him for that, and says that she hopes her son will have a good friend. After a short journey, the carriage with the Duchess and the castle finally arrived at the palace of the Marquis. The girls who were in the street were very much surprised and said that it was the first time they had seen this carriage. But another girl said that it looked like the Duchess had arrived raw for 'em. The protagonist along with her son are greeted by the servants of this house, rather than greeting the arriving guests, at which point the boy climbs out of the carriage first. After he got out suddenly, the boy turned to his mother and gave her his hand. He told her to grab her hand, obviously to help his mom down from the carriage. The girl was very much pleased by this gesture from her son and thanked him. After she got out of the carriage, the girl said that her son is an excellent attendant. The protagonists are already met by one of the servants of the house. He tells them that he will escort them to the garden. After they finally reach the garden, the boy notices that the cake that has been prepared for the birthday celebration is indeed huge. But he also notes that it is a cake smaller than... And here is the birthday cake. The main character at this point looks at her son and is happy, because she realizes that the Cassel is pretending that he doesn't look worried. In her opinion, this also makes him even cuter than he was. After they reach the garden, the Duchess and her son are met by the Marquise. She tells them that she could not have expected that the Duchess would decide to visit them. The girl thanks them for accepting the invitation. But the protagonist says that she should thank the Marquise for sending the invitation. The Marchesa also points out that the Duchess has not arrived alone, but with her son, whom she calls cute, while the boy hides behind his mother, obviously because he is a little shy. Marquise says she was a little worried because her son Radius didn't have any friends his age. According to her, she wants their children to be friends with each other very badly. At this point, the Duchess touches her son's head, who is blushing with embarrassment, and says that although her son is a little shy, he is still a very kind and sweet child, mentioning that she thinks they could become good friends. Also, the Duchess cheerfully says that she wouldn't mind meeting her son either, because she thinks Radius is a very sweet child too. Then the Duchess begins to flatter the Marquise, and says that looking at her, she realizes that her son Radius should also be as smart and beautiful as his mother. While the Marquise blushes, and tells the Duchess that she embarrasses her a little. Marquis says that they have specially installed a video sphere so that her son can be seen by those who came to the party. According to her, the Duchess can see the beautiful images of the Radius that they have already made. The protagonist is very much surprised that there is some kind of video sphere. She is surprised that there is a camera in this world too, or something like that. Seeing this, main heroine admires the video sphere. In her opinion, it is simply impressive, and she thinks that if she had the same video device, and we would be able to capture all the cute images of her son's face, while the cough itself does not look as happy. Dear friends, and if you want to find out what was next, then be sure to like this video, and do not forget to write comments when this video will gain 5,000 likes or 40,000 views. I will definitely make for you the next part, because the chapters in this manga is more than enough.